Welcome to Music Crush, a new music podcast hosted by Flute New Music Consortium. I'm Elizabeth Robinson.
And I'm Nicole Reiner. If you like the show, please rate and review it on the platforms wherever you listen to podcasts, particularly on Apple Podcasts. It really helps people find us and grow the show. And of course, you can learn more about Flute New Music Consortium at flutenewmusicconsortium.com. Today's guest is beloved composer Alex Shapiro, who has built an unconventional life interweaving her dynamic musical career with avid pursuits of wildlife photography, nonfiction writing, and a devotion to advocacy. Published by Activist Music LLC, her works are heard daily in concerts and broadcasts and can be found on over 30 commercially released recordings from around the world. Alex lives in Washington State's remote San Juan Island, and when she's not composing, she can be found communing with the sea life as seen on her music and photo-filled blog, notesfromthekelp.com, and her website, alexshapiro.org.
Can I open a potentially dangerous can of worms?
Sure.
You mentioned Midwest earlier. And as I said, I have a spouse who has caused me to be at Midwest a lot more than probably.
Right. Were you there this year? Were you there this year?
No. We are in a phase of our lives now where he has followed my career. So Midwest is a little bit less relevant to him.
What does he do, by the way?
He, for most of our relationship, has been a college band director. Right now, he's working in the University Foundation, and I'm working at South Dakota State. We were at Midwest in, I forget if it was 2018 or 2019, and I think I had a radicalizing feminist moment at that Midwest. Nicole has heard me tell this story, which is why she is nodding.
But I love this.
I'm eager to hear this one.
They had a panel on women composers in band music. And on the panel were Jennifer Higdon, Libby Larson, and Augusta Thomas Reed.
Yeah.
And they had this really great slideshow of numbers and how small the numbers of women in band literature were at the time. And I was really impressed with just the detail and the statistics that they went into. And then the three guest composers talked for a while, and there was no secret what the subject of the panel was. It was right there in the first word of the name. Then the first person that had a question was more of a comment, really, and proceeded to start heckling Pulitzer Prize-winning composer. Were you there also? Okay.
Oh, I was there. I was ready to slug him. I knew who he was. Yep. He actually walked in with that plan. As he walked past me, he had his comments pre-written on a piece of paper that he was grasping in his hand. He was just using it as a pulpit to attack everybody. And he basically just looked like the total jerk that he is. But go ahead. I don't want to spoil your story.
Oh, no. I had heard later that he had made sort of a career of doing that. But Jennifer Higdon and Libby Larson are the two speakers that I remember having the mic drop moment at the end. I forget what Libby said, but it was so eloquent and so smart about the pendulum swinging in the wrong direction. And then I vaguely remember Jennifer Higdon grabbing the microphone and saying, "Besides which, you're just wrong," at which I think they lost control of the room. But I spent the rest of that convention talking to other women. I was there with a friend who is a composer and a flutist also, and I was shopping for flutes. So I was speaking to the woman who was selling flutes for that particular brand maker, and we were all just so aghast that it had happened. But I think the thing that was shocking to me was that it happened to Jennifer Higdon, who has a Pulitzer and is arguably in the top whatever percent of her profession. And something in my brain broke, I think, because I had always assumed, like, if I could just get to a certain place in my career, this will stop. When I get to a certain age, this will stop. If I can learn to stop saying the F word every other sentence and articulate myself in a coherent way, this will stop. And I'm not in my 50s yet, but I think that's when I ran out of fucks, was when that man did what he did. And I
Yeah.
was like, you know what? I'm going to aggressively not program male composers, possibly for the rest of my life.
So he
And
did a
so
good thing.
the only person causing men to lose out on opportunities, you creepy, horrible heckler, is you.
Right.
But I was talking to a woman who ran or worked with, gosh, I can't, I want to say it was the Athena Institute. It was an organization out of Georgia that offered a composition or some other type of creative activity project to young girls in Georgia. And she was talking about how for years she just would program women and people of color and not tell anybody that that's what she was doing. So she was like feeding them their vegetables without
Without
telling
saying,
them that
here is a carrot and this is an artichoke and you will like it. No, it's much better to just put it on the plate. Let them
Yeah,
enjoy
yeah.
it.
I
Yep.
don't remember where I was going with this. I think I had a question for you somewhere in there, but yeah.
But I love that you bring that up because I was very much there. There's some backstory. I'm not going to say the guy's name to give him too much credit, but he's a real case and kind of a nutcase, frankly. He had actually contacted me about 2 months earlier, or a few months earlier than that, wanting to pick my brain about how to get into the band world. And I talk to anybody and everybody about how and help them. Right? I do these kinds of free consults all the time. I'll take the time. I'll take 50 minutes out of my life to talk to anybody and help them be in our field because it's a joyous thing. So this guy picked my brain. I gave him every bit of information I could think of that would help him because, he seemed to be a decent enough composer. I mean, the stuff I heard of his didn't rock my boat, but he could put notes next to each other. And then he turned around and talk about me having my brain explode when I saw that this was the guy that actually stood up and basically told, as I recall, one of his great lines was, why don't you just all wait your turn? To which Jennifer, I think, said, we've waited about 500 years. I think that's about long enough. I think she said something like that. She
I
was
think
great.
I remember that now
Yeah,
that you
both she
mention
and
it.
Libby were fabulous. I forget if Gusty said anything. I don't remember. It's a power panel. It was fantastic. But yeah, I just thought to myself, oh my God, I was shaming myself. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I gave this asshole all my, so much of my time in a few emails and a phone call to help him. And he turns out to be a troll. He's a jerk. But the reality is I see the bigger picture of it. There are always going to be people like that out there for the foreseeable future. It has nothing to do with how good and perfect we are, how many Pulitzers you have, how many flute awards you have, whatever. It's like, forget it. There are always going to be nasty assholes out there who will never see the world just right. Our job is to ignore them, rise above it, and do the right thing. Don't give people like that the space and the air to get an echo chamber going. The best thing to do is ignore them and move forward and do what we all do very elegantly and graciously. That's my solution for people like that because they're not going to go away. But the good news is they are kind of few and far between. I mean, really, the fact that everybody remembers that, a lot of people remember that outburst in that panel. It was great. I actually had stood up out of my seat because I was going to say something to him. I was sitting in the front row. And one of my friends said, "Oh my God, Alex, I saw you stand up and I thought you were going to go over there and slug him." Because they know me. And I said, no. I said I was getting ready to say something, but then the panel had it down. They didn't need me. So, but I was like, but they do us a favor because they're reminding us what's out there that's bad. The fact that there are very small people out there who don't see the world we do, and they're the lesser for it. They will not have happy big lives. And we're in power. We have the power. We have the joy. The old adage, the best revenge is living well, and we all live so well and create our art and support each other and put good things out into the world. And that is far more powerful than little people like that guy. That's great you were there.
I love that you were both there. Can I
Yeah.
ask, maybe beyond the point, but I'm hoping for a certain answer because I wasn't there. Is this person actually all that successful?
No, not particularly, although I have to say he had an orchestral performance with a female conductor I know. I believe it was in New York, and she apparently didn't know what a charlatan he was. Um, so I was kind of saddened to see that. And I think I might have said I didn't like I don't know her well enough to have contacted her out of the blue, but I think one time when I saw her, I might have mentioned something on the side. I mean, that's the other thing that anybody of any background needs to always keep in mind. If you're going to be a total jerk with a capital T and a capital J, guess what? It's a really small community and everybody's going to know about it. And if you're not going to be working a whole lot when you pull stunts like that. Because when we have all of us have choices about who we work with, who we program or whatever, who we recommend. I recommend composers all the time for gigs I can't do or don't want to do. I'm like Commission Central. I'm so happy to turn other conductors on to my colleagues. And you know what, he so readily shoved himself right off that list as any jerk would do. I mean, like people don't realize that everything they do, especially on social media, and I tell students this all the time, I remind them that it's indelible. There's this thing called a cache, right? CACHE. Everything they've ever put in the internet, every snarky comment, every thread, every bullshit response to something that wasn't respectful or nice or kind, you know what? It's all there. And your peers, even if you don't think we are your friends, guess what? One step removed, it's social media. We see it on the news feeds. We see it on other people's posts. And it immediately tells us who you are and immediately tells us that we're not going to give you an opportunity. There are a number of people I've seen over the years like that, where I just take note. They don't even necessarily know me. And I maybe haven't met them, but I see what they're like and I see the stuff they spew. And I think to myself, okay, duly noted. That's a person I'm not going to help with their career when there are so many other people that I'm so happy to help if I'm in a position to do so in some minor way. So I think that's sort of our last laugh. And that's the thing that people have to keep in mind, all of us, myself included, right? I mean, listen, I always say this to students. We are all snarky. We're human, of course. I can snark with the best of them. Just ask my husband. I mean, the things I spew offline, to him, we are on the floor laughing, all the time with the things I'll say. But would I ever say that, in public? No. Would I ever type it? No. And that's the thing, snark away, but don't type it. Call your friend or hang out together and snark away, but don't put it in writing. It'll bite you in the butt. And that's what this guy, getting it back to the Midwest thing, I think he completely lost sight of that he was, engraving his own tombstone in that room, at least, because I can't imagine there would be anybody in that room who would want to program him after that.
This conversation has been such a salve for me.
Likewise, for me too. This is so much fun talking to you. I love these conversations. I like being frank. I think we need more frank podcasts, And I promise I'll stop calling you Frank.
I will call you Shirley.
You can call me Shirley. But what
so
else is
much.
going on in your lives as flutists that's worth talking about, that we haven't engaged in, because you've been very centric on me, but I want to flip it to you and say, what burning things in the past week or two have come up for you, either of you, that you want your listeners to know about?
For me, I'm a big picture person, and I don't think the big things in my life as a flute teacher, as a mentor to young flutists, are really that flute centric. I mean, I think these are the things,
I agree.
I've talked about this so many times on the podcast, or to Elizabeth, really to Elizabeth a lot. But you talked earlier about encouraging young people to see the world with more nuance and see the grays. And for me, my experience with my students is that they struggle with that when giving themselves a break. They struggle to give themselves a break because that's where they see the black and white is, if I don't do this thing perfectly the very first time, the whole world's going to explode. So I have not gone back yet. I mean, this episode will air well after the semester starts, but I'm looking at going back to school next week. That's when we start. And so the email inbox is already exploding with nervous, conscientious, hardworking students who really could just fucking chill for another week, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I would like to, but they won't.
But can't you tell them that? I mean, because they respect you. Can
in
you?
a way, yeah. So
Yeah.
I have a saying, sometimes you find out that you have a saying because your students start chuckling when you say it and say it back to you. But it turns out I say this about 15,000 times every week. no puppy is going to die.
Ah, I love it.
Try the thing, because what we're doing, you know, in flute lessons is, I mean, I will applaud the work that they've already done, but my job is to leave no stone unturned, right? Like my students come to me and say, okay, I want to be a flutist. I assume when they come to me and say this, they are saying, show me everything you know that I need to do so that I am not, you know, eating dog food out of my car or something. I mean, this was always my fear. Like I love my parents, but I don't want to live in my parents' basement when I get out of college, right? So this is the attitude that I have towards my students too. So lessons are a lab. A flute lesson is, okay, you worked on this thing that we did together and that I showed you last week. Show me what you got and let's keep building, because there's always something new to challenge you. And every time you push through to the other side of a challenge, you're that much stronger of a player. You're that much more diverse of a player. But that means constantly making yourself vulnerable, trusting me, the teacher, that I know what I'm doing and I've got you. And making yourself vulnerable every week and trying these hard things. The hard things never go away. I'm 49. The hard things still haven't gone away. I've found new hard things to do. And that's what keeps me playing the flute. But it's so, it hurts my students' feelings. It takes a lot of bravery and a lot of pep talks early on, particularly to get them to the point where they're like, okay, she can tell that I've been working on this. Now she's asking me to do a new thing I've never done before, and I'm not going to do it right because it's hard and it's the first time I've ever done it. And so this is when I break out the "no puppy is going to die" phrase, which comes up a whole lot.
I think
because that's
very,
the black and white that they hold themselves to, is like this kind of perfectionism that, you know, they have to pass a test right away. And that's just not, I don't think that's how life works, but it's certainly not how making music works.
definitely not. You know, it's almost like force them to say out loud, okay, if I didn't pass this test, what would actually happen in my life?
Yeah.
And like, as you say, not only are puppies not going to die, but a lot of other things are not going to be particularly harmed in their life either, but they don't have that perch perspective. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I use that same analogy, by the way. I often say it's only music, no one's going to die. I say it's not brain surgery, it's music. No one's going to die unless you throw a baton at, you know, at the violist in front of you. Like that, then someone could die. But other than that, so I'm with you completely on that saying. Completely.
That and you know, sometimes when I love, I don't know if other people love it, but I was just at a few schools a couple months ago visiting and giving master classes, and one school in particular, the teacher is a good friend of mine. I adore her, and she's like, man, my students are so nervous right now. Just, you know, just get ready because they're going to play for you, and they're just nervous wrecks, all of them. And I was like, yeah, I know, I'm experiencing some version of the same thing. I think post-pandemic, they're still really reeling, these young children who haven't lived as many years pre-pandemic, I guess. But this one student in particular was just a mess, you know, just so she played pretty nicely, but it was so hard to work with her because she was just out of her mind nervous.
Wow.
And so I said, what's wrong? Are you nervous right now? And she looked at me like, are you crazy, old lady? You know, and she was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, but why? And so then we had this conversation, you know, I'm like, everybody else sort of looked again at me like, are you insane? What do you mean? Why is she nervous? But I made her say, like, what do you think is going to happen? What's the worst that can happen right now? And she said, I could play wrong notes. And I was like, you already did. Look,
and I'm still here.
We're all friends. We're all here smiling still, you know. So I think going through, maybe it's good for all of us, but I definitely make my students and other students that I am lucky enough to get to torture as a guest sometimes make them go through this exercise of, all right, let's really unspool this in a very literal way. Like what is all this anxiety about? What do you actually think is the terrible thing that's going to happen if it's not perfect?
You're doing them a huge favor by forcing them to do that exercise and to unspool it, because they're going to be faced with that anxiety over and over and over again. And frankly, I think as one becomes a professional, it only gets worse because the stakes are higher. You know, right now it's about passing a class or getting chosen for the school orchestra or something. And then suddenly it's going to be getting that seat with the Philharmonic someplace, and it's going to be a very different thing. So yeah, you're really helping them. How much, I'm curious, in universities, are there mental health classes, not just availability, like somebody you can go talk to, but is there any university that has some kind of, um, equilibrium, mental health, perch perspective? Here's a holistic approach to your career kind of class? Because if they don't exist, they should.
Well, Elizabeth, I'm curious what you've seen. I have certainly never been in a place where that is part of the curriculum or institutionalized. It's sort of like you're relying on certain professors to take it upon themselves to address that as in the way that they teach, because it's just a clear need.
I've been a lot of different places with a lot of different demographics, and I think more institutions are trying to do more to address that facet of student life. I don't always think that that is a great thing to have institutionalized, in that if you tried to do something prescriptive for a large swath of the population, inevitably it is not appropriate for as many people as it is appropriate for. I started my teaching career at a community college in Indiana, and pretty quickly realized that I couldn't make a lot of money teaching music appreciation, but I could get a large number of adjunct credits teaching intro to academic skills. And they gave us a sort of pre-planned curriculum, and part of what we were teaching about was, how to take notes or different ways that people's brains worked. And I was really good at teaching that because I was really good at school. But I was also teaching a unit on financial literacy and a unit on mental health. And this was a community college that served a group of people who had some real life challenges that I had never been exposed to up to that point. And I think back sometimes to what it must have been like to be one of those people and have, 20-something-year-old Elizabeth talking to them about how to manage your finances as I rolled up in my car that wasn't older than their children.
Right.
And I see institutions where I have worked or hear about institutions where my colleagues work, and they talk about, managing your mental health. And it's like, that's great if you're an average 18-year-old and you have no family responsibilities and you aren't from a place where but it lands really different if you're a non-traditional student or you're an 18-year-old student, but you're also responsible for paying the mortgage so that your parents aren't homeless. It's really different if you're responsible for other human lives. It's really
Exactly.
different if you
If
have
you're
a
the parent of a 2-year-old and you're going to school.
or have like a biological predisposition to a mental illness for which we do not yet have.
Right.
I don't know. I applaud that universities want to care about their students, and I am in no way saying that we shouldn't all try to take care of each other, but I also get really nervous when it gets big because there are more opportunities to do harm.
That's interesting. Well, it gets back to what we were talking about, nuance, is that obviously no two human beings are the same and everybody has different needs. And there's a very big difference, across the student body of what the needs are going to be. So yeah. Yeah.
I think back a lot to I attended a private college, and as such we had a counseling center where, if you were paired with a counselor, you could have as many sessions with that person as you needed.
Right.
And there were years where I needed more than 3. But at a larger state institution, even at my current institution, resources are limited, and so students are capped at 3 or 6 or 8, whatever the number is. There's a cap to how many sessions they can have with a counselor, and if I could wave a wand and magically change the world, we would just have professionals for however many people needed professionals. And
Without a
just,
cap, exactly. People need assistance and they need someone to talk to. And yeah, no cap.
but even as I say that, is that the job of a university, or is that the job of a society? And that gets
Well, I
big and
guess
out of.
yeah. The problem is the society drops the ball. And so at least what I've always thought is that the university, even if they don't have it in-house, maybe they can be a portal to offer services that are either free or highly affordable to any student in need, just to help them. Like I always feel like, I feel the same way about business and music or music business entrepreneurial classes too, that it's one thing to teach somebody to be a virtuosic flutist. Great, awesome. And you've got the preparation to do your best audition. That's really great. But there's so many other things, obviously, inherent in having a life as a professional musician, that why I think it is very important for you guys to know copyright and to know, how the music business world works, and also for all of us to also know how to have a full life and a mentally healthy, balanced, emotionally healthy, balanced life, right? So these to me are, from my perspective, perfect world, they're as important as teaching somebody to play the flute beautifully. I mean, they were accepted because they already played pretty beautifully. And now it's a matter of, making them wonderful, even more wonderful musicians. And at the same time we're doing that, I just feel like we're sculpting a person, not just a flutist on stick figure flutist, not like a flutist with ice cream popsicle stick legs. You're just a flutist. You're not just a flutist. You're a whole person. So, but your points are very well taken, Elizabeth. I hear you and agree 100%. It's not at all one size fits all, and maybe it isn't the job of a university. I hear you. You're really eloquent on this.
But even still, I mean, as you're talking, it's my job as a flute teacher, and Nicole has illustrated this really well with her anecdote. You're not just teaching flute, you're teaching a human.
Exactly.
And I find in my own playing a lot of the things that I do or don't do that are good or not good for my playing often mirror behaviors that I have outside of my practice space.
Yeah.
And so, when you're talking to a young, in my case, flutist, and you're saying, that was hard. Did you address that in the way that maybe we talked about or you meant to the last time that we came up against this? Or did you have an avoidance reaction? And they, yeah, it's like, is this
Yeah.
something that shows up in maybe a theory class that we have together? And they're like, yeah.
There you
And I'm
go.
like, I feel you. I do the same thing with, maybe exercise. Like, could we think of other ways that this could impact our life as a flutist, as a person, as a citizen of society? So I don't know. I'm not ever just teaching flute or
No,
music.
no, you have a very holistic approach to the human being you're with in that room. Yeah. And that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
It's such a privilege to teach one-on-one and to
Mm-hmm.
teach people for multiple years in a row too. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you really can do your best work when you get to be the individual teacher
Yeah.
for each person, as opposed to in the classroom, right? Because people aren't
Absolutely.
all on the same page and working at the same speed at the same time.
Yeah.
And yeah, boy, the private studio is just a real privilege in
Yeah.
comparison.
Teaching in the same place over a long period of time. I think
Yeah.
being new at a university, there's a lot to building that community that I don't think I appreciated until I had to start building that community again. And then being sort of newer in my career, even when I left the previous position, I had a handful of students who graduated the year that I left.
Right.
And watching them be not students
Yeah.
and be adults who are functioning or not functioning, and sometimes taking advice that I gave them and sometimes tossing it out the window. It's been, yeah, teaching
Yeah.
can be really cool. But I do think having the ability to have a through line and see the long term
Yeah.
effects of your work it's important.
Absolutely. Where are you now? What, because it sounds like you fairly recently jumped to something else.
I started in August of 2022 at South Dakota State University. So I
That's
have
what I thought you were. Yeah.
I have just started my fourth semester
Right.
here.
And where were you before?
Prior to this, I was in Southwest Missouri, and
Okay.
I was there for 4 or 5 years. And prior to that, there had been a lot of jumping and hopping between my career and my husband's career. So having the opportunity to have some freshmen come in Missouri and graduate in Missouri and sort of send them out into the world, I think gave me a deeper appreciation for the sort of what Nicole was talking about, the watching the development over time, and then starting again in South Dakota. Just, every university, every music department is its own little biome of specialness. And so figuring out like what's special about this one, and what operates in this way and what operates in another way that I can't fully articulate or think to ask about. It's been really interesting to start over at this age and this particular stage in life, and just gain a new appreciation for how an environment can shape the experience that everyone in it is having.
That's true. And also being in South Dakota, I mean, that's an interesting state to be in, because you're not in the thick of a lot of other things. You are your own biosphere there.
Sure.
A big school. It's got a great music department. And it's, you're in a whole, it's not like being in Southern California or something. It's a very different world. So
I think Nicole and I have spent many hours talking about how it is a different thing to be a performer, especially a performer who favors new music in sort of the middle of the country.
That's right. But what a great opportunity. In a sense, you become a very big fish in a smaller pond, because you're the ones responsible, or, you can be the ones responsible for really bringing a whole new thing to a population that isn't already saturated with it. I mean, that's a great thing. It's a great, I mean, I'm not saying that there isn't already a lot of new music in South Dakota, but I think that there's more, let's say, in Southern California than there is in South Dakota. And so you have or Wyoming. And so I think you have an opportunity in states like that to make a really big impact.
The scenes are different. The scenes are different. I don't want to speak to Nicole's experience, but I sort of made a conscious decision to roll up in South Dakota and say, this is who I am and this is what I am about. And I'm not going to aggressively force it down anyone's throat, but I'm also not going to stop playing flute quartets about chickens. So here we are.
Anne. Yay, Annie. Chickens. Annie and the chicken.
I wonder if her ears are burning right now, in the best possible way. But I think I had it a little easier because Annie Guzzo had already started laying that groundwork at UW before I got there.
Yeah.
And so there was already this great enthusiasm for composing.
Absolutely.
And for new music. And I was able to just do what I wanted to do and not feel like an oddball, or not feel like I had to justify it. Universities are communities. I mean, they are their own worlds, and I think, this country is so rural, right? So the vast majority of the schools that you really think about, with the exception of schools in Southern California, maybe, because there are some really big name music programs there, but the vast majority of them are just off in the middle of cornfields and stuff. I went to University of Illinois, and then Michigan State, and then Indiana University.
Wow.
And what was around any of those schools? Nothing.
Right.
But on campus and in those communities, and little maybe 30-ish miles in radius around those towns, were these vibrant intellectual and artistic communities.
Very
and
much
so
so.
I do think we are doing more than just, whether or not we choose to, we're doing more than just teaching our students at universities in America anyway. We're really creating a whole environment of the therapy and the, physical education. We always have gyms. that students can go to. I mean, our universities function as cities for our students, like
Absolutely.
little cities for them to learn how to live on their own and take care of themselves. But all of that is, or a whole lot of that is provided by the university. Room and board, can you imagine? I mean, it's never great. Everyone wants to get out of the dorms and they're too expensive, but just the fact that you can go to a school and have all of your needs taken care of for you so that you can just work on yourself artistically and intellectually. I mean, that's
right. It's
that's
like
a
an artist residency. They just don't realize it.
yeah. I mean, the food is crappier, you know, but but yeah, I mean, it is, it's a pretty magical time in their lives, and we are part of that.
Yeah.
Which I think always means more than teaching, even though we don't live there on campus like our students might.
Right.
We're part of the fixtures there. We're part of their infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a
Absolutely.
weird thing. It's weird, actually.
How many years have you been there?
17 and a half now.
Wow, that's great.
You are
How?
part
I
of the
know.
infrastructure.
That's right.
Yeah, because I feel like I'm still in my late 20s.
That's a
Well,
good thing.
Depending on how many miles I've hiked. Sometimes my knees don't feel that way, but you know, like it's how, I don't know how the math works out that I've been there for that close to 20 years.
That's exactly how long I've been on San Juan Island, 17 years. this
Really?
year. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. Big change.
Big,
Where
yeah,
were you
big moves
before?
for both of us.
Malibu, California. And so I was 24 years in Southern California. And then before that, 21 years in Manhattan, which I like to always joke and remind people, Manhattan is half the size of the island on which I live now. But my island on
Wow.
which I live now only has 6,000 people. So, so it's
Wow.
slightly different. But yeah, I've sort of triangulated, and it's great. So yeah, I've been here a very long time now. I can't even believe how long it's been that I've been on this island.
I can't imagine doing anything for 17 years. That's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
It just
It
sort of
goes
flows
by.
by, right? You know, it
Yep.
just, the years unfold as long as they're happy years, you know? And if they're not happy, then you make a change. Like I remember when I was ready to leave LA, I remember the switch just flipped for me. And I was just done with LA and the traffic and the craziness and the neurotic people and, you know, the wildfires and all of that. And I was ready to go. But I had done everything I wanted to do in LA. You know, I felt like I had a really good time there. Made all my mistakes there, not all of them, but many of them. Made them there, and got to leave them behind and become another person, or the same person, but just a happier person in a rural environment. Yeah.
How did you land on San Juan Island? Was it
Completely
random or was it something
random.
specific?
I knew I wanted to leave. I didn't know
Oh.
where I was going to go, but I knew I would probably do well in a really rural place because I had just done a residency in the McDowell Colony in New Hampshire, and I was so productive and happy there in that little cabin in the woods. And I thought, wow, why shouldn't my life look like this all the time? Because I'm not teaching, I'm not waving a stick at anybody, I'm not playing an instrument. Nobody needs me. It doesn't matter where I live, as long as I can just write music and be on the internet and, you know, travel, get on planes and do the, you know, the advocacy stuff that I do and the speaking and all that. And so I realized I'd reached a point in my mid 40s that I could live anywhere in the world I wanted to. But I didn't know where that was going to really be. And then I ran into a dear friend of mine who had just stepped down as a percussionist for many years with the San Francisco Opera. And she and her husband had left Oakland and moved up to a neighboring island. We're right on the Canadian border here. Literally, I'm looking at Canada over there. And they had just moved to an island that I can see from my island on the Canadian side. And so I was in LA and I ran into her at some music reception or something. And I told her about my plan to move. And she said, "We found paradise. You need to come up and see." And so I did. And it was indeed paradise. And I spoke to an immigration attorney in Canada because I have absolutely no Canadian connections. And he said, you know, you'll have no problem getting in, but it will take 3 years because there's like 700,000 other people trying to get into Canada. And at that point, I realized I don't want to wait. I'm really done with LA. I want to leave. And I looked at a map and I happened to notice that the dotted yellow boundary line was between her island and my island. Seriously. Like, and it's the same archipelago. These are all entrails of Vancouver Island, which is a really big island. That's the one with Victoria. The BC capital is at the base of Vancouver. And Vancouver, the city, the BC city, is across from me 60 miles that way. And so I looked and I thought, well, how different could these islands be? Maybe I should check out the US islands. And that's how it happened. I knew one realtor. That's all I knew. I knew nobody here. But the great thing about not having kids and only cats is you figure, hey, if it doesn't work, I'll give it a couple of years. If it doesn't work out, if this sucks, I can go anywhere else. It's not like I'm uprooting other human beings' lives, right? I can make choices. And it turned out to be perfect. It turned out to make me so happy being here. So 17 years later, here we are. But I think serendipity and just being able to take risks, the same way we talk about doing artistically, which I'm constantly talking to students about. Take risks, get out of your comfort zone, do things that are not easy or comfortable, because ultimately it's going to be great. It's going to be a great experience one way or the other. You may even decide, okay, this isn't for me. I'm never going to do it again. Or like me in band, you might decide I'm doing something that's terrifying. And oh my God, it opened up a whole nother career path for me. I mean, I had never, been to a wind band concert when I was commissioned by the U.S. Army to write my first wind band piece. I had no idea what a euphonium was. I had no idea. And so, but I jumped in, I was terrified, and I figured, okay, I'm going to try this. What's the worst that can happen? No one's going to die. That's our motto. No one's going to die. No puppies, nobody. And it worked out so well that, now I've written 26 band pieces. So that's the last one I'm doing now. The 26 is on my desk right now. So, this is what I'm always telling everybody, right? Be as creative in your life as you are in your music. Right? And take as many risks as you can and get out of that comfort zone, because it's going to make it more interesting. And you don't have to like everything. And it's okay to make mistakes. I think that's one thing that we're, like Nicole, you're trying to instill that in your students. It's okay to play a wrong note. This is the process. Don't beat yourself up and feel like your life is about to end if you screw up on a passage, right? And I say this to composers all the time. I mean, all we do is improvise in slow motion. Not everything's going to be perfect. That's what the eraser is for, or the delete button. You throw that shit out and try again.
I like that, improvising in slow motion.
I wish I were a good improviser in real time, like my dear friends who are incredible jazz artists. I do not possess that talent, and I'm so envious of it. I wish I had that talent, but I don't. So I do it in slow motion. I hear it in my head, and then I can notate it, Anyway, you guys are so great to have this conversation with me. I can't tell you how much I enjoy this. I mean, this is real conversation about a lot of real things, and it's very welcome and very sane making for me. This is great therapy.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Music Crush. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also support the podcast, read show notes, and learn more about FNMC by visiting www.flutenewmusicconsortium.com.